Hey folks, Scott Bradley here, and welcome to Tour Bus University. Each episode has two parts, the free part that you're hearing now, and a subscriber-only bonus part that you can access by subscribing to the Tour Bus University Patreon. My guest today is Dave Koz, a 9-time Grammy-nominated saxophonist that has built one of the most successful and varied careers in instrumental music. In his 30 years in the business, Koz has sold well over 1 million records as a recording artist, produced successful tours and jazz cruises, acted as a bandleader and a host on television, ran a show on Sirius XM, opened up a restaurant, and wrote the theme song for the show General Hospital. Despite all the success, he remains one of the most humble guys in showbiz, as you'll hear in our conversation. He has a way of making everyone he speaks with feel special, and I can't think of a better musician to help us learn the mindset required to have both a rewarding career and a rewarding life. It also helps that his background as an entertainer has made him incredibly articulate. I barely had to edit this one at all, and he said so much gold in this podcast that I've already gone back and listened to it twice, and you just might too. So please welcome Dave Koz. All right, I've got Dave Koz here. Dave, thanks so much for doing this.
It is absolutely my pleasure. Any chance to share a little bit of time with you, Scott? Always fun, always informative. I always learn stuff from you.
I appreciate that. Well, I think that we're all going to learn something from you today because, the whole point of this podcast is to kind of prepare musicians and artists and performers of all kinds to build successful, long-lasting, rewarding careers, on their own terms. And that's something that you've managed to do for decades now.
Well, I appreciate that very much. And it's, I think part of the reason for remaining relevant for a long period of time is one's ability to be open to change and not so set in our ways. And I think as any creative person that sort of closes themselves off to learning new things and learning how, and sometimes it's not the easiest thing too. You get to know who you are and how you do things, and then there's another thing that comes from another side street, and you go, oh boy, I didn't see that one coming. And sometimes a little off-putting too, but the idea of embracing these different ways of doing things and people like yourself, brilliant people. We were just talking before we went on the air about how the postmodern jukebox in coronavirus crisis, right? During this pandemic, you have really shown your creativity and doing all these different things to keep the PMJ brand and the PMJ artists really out in the forefront, even when you're not touring and not doing new videos.
Yeah, I think it helped that we started on the internet in a sense. So it's like, everybody's live streaming now. I'm like, we've been doing that since like 2012. Come on.
Old hat.
Get together, people. Yeah, right. But actually I can speak on, how you were talking, how important it is to be open-minded and to, pursue different opportunities. I remember, so the first time that we met you, it was 2014. Postmodern Jukebox had just started to kind of take off, but I mean, at this time, we didn't have any credibility in the industry at all. My manager, who was a friend of yours, Jaron, told me the plan was, okay, we're going to get you guys out to LA and we're going to do a whole bunch of collaborations with people. And we were, he was calling, he was putting calls. Everybody was saying no. They're like, well, we don't know who this person is or anything like that. And then we got our first hit, and it was Dave Koz. He's like, Dave Koz is down to do a video. So we went out and we came out there, and the one thing that really struck me, not just, the fact that we made some awesome videos and you were just an incredible performer, but you probably exemplified the idea of what a class act is,
Aww.
Like you kind of taught us how, and you taught me how a successful musician should act. You were generous to everybody. You made everybody feel special. You were given great ideas. You were easy to work with. And at the end of the day, everybody had such a good experience working with you. And I just realized, like, oh, this is what you're supposed to do. If you get to that point, at this point, I mean, I wasn't really at this point yet. I was still kind of just finding my way. But I realized that that's how you should act. You should be somebody that just elevates the experience for everybody.
Wow. Well, Scott, you just made my month. Well, I learned in the beginning of my life, really, from my mom primarily. Just talking about what we do, there are a lot of amazing musicians. I mean, talent off the charts. But talent is not everything when you want to live a life that feels good. And so I learned a long time ago when I was putting bands together, when I was a sideman, and I saw how other artists acted and how other leaders. I worked for a variety of different people on the road before I became an artist myself. And those situations, both the positive and the negative ones, were of invaluable experiences for me, because I got a chance to see, well, how am I going to be if I ever get into this position where I get to call the shots? How do I want to be? And that way of life, or that MO, primarily came from my mom and my dad too. That really instilled in my brother and sister and I at a very early age of sort of how to be in the world, to be gracious and try at least to make people feel good, and to be a team player, and at the same time not sacrificing your own humanity and what it is that's important to you. So it's kind of finding that right balance. But for me, like putting musicians together for my bands or tours or cruises or whatever, it's always about, of course, you have to have talent, you have to have something to say, you have to have an ability to be an artist that has something to say, and a fan base as well. But then there's this other thing about working together and the kind of personality that you have. Are you a person that has their arms and their ears and their eyes open at all times? Are you willing to collaborate? Are you willing to step off of your place to kind of move to the left or to the right a step or two to see if you can find a new place with somebody else? And those are the attributes that mean most to me in seeing other musicians, and also the things that I want to do too. Because, like, say for me coming to the very first PMJ session, I had no idea. I didn't know. I mean, I saw a couple of the videos, but I really had no idea what I was stepping into. And it was music that I didn't know either. You had to teach me the song. I remember that. You said, have you ever watched Game of Thrones? I was like, I heard of it. I never watched it. You said, you never heard the theme? I said, nope. And that was the first thing that we did. You taught it to me like 5 minutes before the video started running. So the idea is to be able to kind of open yourself up to the influences of the people around you, and knowing that there's really not much to lose. I mean, and everything to gain, actually.
Absolutely, yeah. No, that's well said. Let's actually dig into that a little bit. Let's talk about your very early career. Now, you started touring right out of college.
Yeah, I graduated from UCLA.
According to Wikipedia.
Yeah. Sometimes they're wrong. In fact, they had a picture of Richard Elliott on my Wikipedia page for like 2 years.
Are you serious?
Richard Elliott is, for those of you who don't know, he's one of my great friends, and he's one of the great saxophone players of all time. So it didn't suck that they had another, really great saxophone player, better than me, picture. But I petitioned them for like 2 years. You got to take Richard Elliott's picture down off of the Dave Koz Wikipedia page.
Wait, so they had it as the main picture, as like the picture is supposed to represent you?
Yeah, and it was a picture of Richard Elliott, and it said at the bottom, Dave Koz.
Why are we trusting these things? Why are we trusting Wikipedia so much?
But okay, well, that fact is true.
So that part
fact
is
you
true.
just
Okay,
said is true.
all right,
yes.
okay.
Yeah,
let's just talk about that, because that is something. I mean, that transition, just coming out of college and getting into the real world and landing a gig. I mean, that is such a crucial time.
Well, I was playing in a wedding band, bar mitzvahs and weddings and fraternity parties all through college and through high school as well. But I was a mass communications major at UCLA. I was not even planning on having a career in music.
Wow.
And I remember the day that I graduated, my parents come from a Jewish family that has a lot of expectations about their kids and their kids' futures. I had no prospect of a job, zero. And my parents looked at me on my graduation day, like Jewish parents, what are you going to do with your life? And I made a deal with them that day. I said, I'm going to give music 6 months and see what I can do. And if I can't get anything happening, then I'll just go get a job somewhere.
Wow.
In the field of study that I was studying at UCLA.
And that's not much time for a music career.
No,
6 months
but
is
2
nothing.
weeks after my graduation, I got a call from a guy named Bobby Caldwell, who is the
What You Won't
singer.
Do for Love?
Exactly.
Oh, wow, okay. Bobby Caldwell, he's the best example of somebody whose voice does not match the way he looks. Like if you look up his YouTube video, you look up the song, just the comments are pretty funny. It's
Well, for the longest time, everybody thought that Bobby was African American.
Right. Yeah.
because of the way he sang and the style of music, and it was so cool. I mean, it was just it just
Yeah.
had every aspect, and he's a brilliant guy, but he's like the skinny white guy.
Yeah.
So anyway, so Bobby I auditioned for Bobby's band, and I got the gig, and next thing I knew, I was playing in his band. For like a who's who in Los Angeles, because this was his big comeback. He had recorded a new album, put me in his band. It was the time of year. I mean, it was a time in the music world in the mid '80s when every song had a sax solo in the middle. And so I remember, this is a quick story from my first gig with Bobby. It was at a place called At My Place, small venue in Santa Monica, no longer there, sadly, but it was the place in the mid '80s to go see music. So it was a 2-show night, sold out. It was packed in there like sardines. The first show ends. I'm playing every song. I'm doing my best. It's my first real gig. And I noticed that we take our bow at the end of the first show, and I could tell, Bobby says, "I need to talk to you." And I could tell he was pissed off at me. And I'm like saying to myself, great, my first gig, I'm going to get fired before the second show. So he looks at me and he says, "Dude, what are you doing?" And I'm like, what do you mean? He said, "I'm moving out of the way during every sax solo so that you can come to the front of the stage and take over. I mean, I'm actually moving out of the way. I need you to just really, make it happen. Don't stand at your microphone and stand in the background. This is your chance to shine." Well, he didn't know what was coming. The second show, after the second show, he said, "Better, but let's back it off just a little bit," because that's all I needed to hear was somebody saying, "Go for it," and it was such an amazing experience too, because he saw something in me that I didn't even know was there, and then that was further backed up by this guy named Jeff Lorber, the fusion music jazz pioneer, who heard me with Bobby and said, "I want you to audition for my band." And then I got into that group. And then Lorber was the first person ever to say, "You should be making your own records." And at that point, the thought of that never even dawned on me. I was such a support player, so happy to be in the background. So those demos that we made, we made a 4-song demo. I remember it was on cassette. We took it to Warner Brothers. They passed. Then we took it to Capitol Records, and Bruce Lemval, the late legendary record exec, took a chance on me. And the next thing I knew, I was signed to Capitol Records. It was the craziest magic carpet ride of all time.
I mean, that's a great story. That's kind of the quintessential old school, like, making it story, isn't it? You got that old school experience.
That at that time, that was really the only way to get it. I mean, there were maybe some other different ways but that seemed like the natural way, sort of natural selection. If you were going to work for other artists, gain your confidence, understand who you are, and then there's always, this is the question I wanted to ask you too. There's always people and it's not just creative people, but we all need champions in our lives. Somebody that recognizes a certain gift that we all have, whatever that gift is. It could be your gift for numbers if you're an accountant, or a gift for in the medical field. So there are those people that you encounter, the mentors, the people that, even if they're not people that stay in your life for, maybe you meet them one day, but they change your life in that very significant way. So I'm curious to know, who are those change agents for you? Was there one in particular that you could say, without that person, I would definitely not be here today?
Geez. Well, there's a bunch. I think that I was pretty fortunate. I think that as I was kind of coming up, there was a lot of people that were influential that took an interest in what I was doing. I mean, and you can drill it down to, like, even just the local NYC area, when I was out in New York and I was playing some things. The producers of Sleep No More, there were some early champions of what I was doing. They recognized that I had some kind of talent. And I mean, I was hired to music direct that show just kind of on the spot, just performing there once. It was a pretty crazy,
wow.
That was cool. And for me, I mean, that was like my first real job. I didn't really have a real job up until that point. Certainly when I started online, my very first video that I put out went viral. And that was because of Neil Gaiman, the writer, who had tweeted it. Back then somebody would, an influential person would put out a tweet and you would get 10,000 views just like that.
Wow.
And that definitely changed how I thought of the internet overall. I realized that this was a valid way to break. And I didn't, obviously 10,000 views, that's just the starting point, whatever, But I realized that there was a kernel of something there. And that experience of going viral really led me down that rabbit hole of what's possible on the internet. And then after that, Jaron, my manager, Jaron, he found me when, I think it was after Puddles, after we did a video with Puddles. But he called me up. And this time I had not heard from any managers. Nobody wanted to represent me at this time. But, he kind of just called me up. He talked my ear off, as Jaron is wont to do. And he... was just laying out the whole vision. And it actually coincided with my own vision, which I thought was kind of silly. Like, I wanted to build this show out of this, but I didn't think anybody else believed in that idea. So, he was an early champion as well. And certainly you were the first, for lack of a better term, celebrity that we worked with Postmodern Jukebox. You were the first one. You showed us that, and I think you did give us kind of at least a veneer of credibility. I think that, it's telling that we haven't worked with too many celebrities after that, but you did give, you did lay some credibility to the project.
You were smart to go for a D-list celebrity like me, or E-list, actually. You started with the D's and E's, and
and then you just stay there,
Yeah, I'm very happy in the D's.
But the thing is, like, that's another thing that is funny, that when people think of A-list celebrities and everything like that, a lot of times those A-list celebrities are so locked into the brand that they are that they can't do anything else. They don't have any freedom. They don't have the ability to go and do different projects and decide that they want to change course and do something. So it's like, if you value fame above all else, sure. But most successful people, I think, don't really put that much value in fame.
What I value most is new experience, especially the older that I get. I want new experiences. I want to be pushed and pulled musically and creatively. Even that thing that we did a few weeks back, it was right before the pandemic hit, actually.
Yeah.
I came over to your house and we were doing a Facebook Live where it was just all requests. And so I didn't know what we were going to play.
Oh, yeah.
We didn't ever talk about anything. We didn't come up with arrangements. That to me is like being tossed into a frying pan, and you just got to rely completely on your instinct, totally on your instinct. And that's what I learned too from, I had a really interesting experience working with Corey Wong from Wolfpack.
Yeah. I want to talk about that later, but yeah.
Okay.
Go on a little bit about that.
But Corey is like you, an internet genius, a guy that has such incredible talent, but has somehow corralled the use of the available technology right now to create his own, like you, his own brand that is, it's using all the available parameters that we all have, but there's something that's different. Like, you guys have unlocked like a code, a special code that makes it work. And what I'm doing is just being a student. I'm trying to learn because this is so not my world. But I did have a writing session with Corey because we're working on a project together that's going to come out next year. And I went into to Minnesota to a little studio that he had, and we spent 3 days together. We wrote so much music. Now, first of all, this is the first time we had ever written music. We played together before,
right?
Did videos together, but we wrote music for my album, and it came so effortlessly. First of all, the guy is crazy talented,
right?
But secondly, the minute I walked in there, he said to me a couple of words that really made a huge impact on me, and I think was the reason why we were so prolific those few days. He said, don't think, just don't think, and just whatever your natural instinct, your natural core musical instinct is, go with that and don't even think anything above it. The truth is, when I'm writing music for anybody else, that's the way I am. I'm very much kind of like, let's just enjoy this moment of writing a song, and whatever it is, it's going to be great. If it's writing music for me, for my records, I'm so much more critical. And I will, in the minute I start writing, I'm starting to be an A&R person and going, no, that's not going to work, and this is not going to work, and that's that's what my MO has been for all these years. Now, not to say that it hasn't worked, because I've made good records and we've had a lot of hit songs over the years. But this was a totally different approach, which was don't stop the creative energy and just let the song be the song for what it is. And it was so much fun. And when I listen back to these little demos, which are really, really rough, they have such heart. They have such natural, like a total vibe. It's like it's just him and me and maybe a little drum machine and a bass part or something like that. But they have so much passion and so much purity and authenticity. So that was a great lesson that I learned from him.
Yeah, well, I think it takes a guy like Corey to kind of unlock that kind of thing. You have to be a visionary in that sense to really get not just your own best work, but the best work of others. I can't wait to hear that music, first of all. But I mean, I think that checks out with whenever you hear about an album that just came together just so organically like that, it always winds up being a great album. And I guess it is just because you're not overthinking things. You're not trying to be an A&R person. You're just being a musician, and that's special. All right, so I want to talk a little bit more about just how you made that switch to becoming a solo artist, because I think as an instrumentalist, you kind of have a unique set of challenges as a solo artist. It's one thing for if you're a singer. It's something very different as an instrumentalist, wouldn't you say?
100%. Because you're not dealing with vocal music. We live in a vocal world.
Yeah.
And if you're an instrumentalist in a vocal world, you're automatically niche. The thing that was working for me in those years was, first of all, the infinite popularity of the saxophone. Now, I would argue that the saxophone has been popular ever since it came out in the 1800s. It was just an immediate instrument that captured people's attention because the way it sounds, it really mimics the human voice in its ability to convey emotion. But it's also, for me at least, it was a lot about timing. So when I released my first record, there was a burgeoning format of radio that was bubbling called smooth jazz. Or it was called New Adult Contemporary for a lot of years, and then they kind of switched it to the name of it to smooth jazz. And there were all these stations that were popping up around the country, CD 101.9 and The Wave in Los Angeles and KIFM in San Diego, and there was a Dallas Fort Worth station. I mean, every major city had this station, and it was blowing up. And that's exactly when I released my first record in 1990. Like the 2 years before that was when this radio format started to really gain traction. And the next thing I knew, within a couple of years, there was those radio stations in every city, and they were clamoring for artists to call their own. So it wasn't necessarily the people like David Sanborn or Bob James that had, or Larry Carlton that had previously existed with very successful careers before the smooth jazz format was really became popular. So they wanted new artists that were just coming out that they could say, these are smooth jazz artists, not contemporary jazz artists or fusion artists from the generation before. And so it was just a perfect storm. Wow. I had the right kind of music that radio programmers liked. I was very visual. I had a big record company, Capitol Records, that poured hundreds of thousands of dollars in promotion and videos, and they really believed. They signed me as a pop artist. They didn't sign me to, at the time, Capitol, and still to this day, Capitol releases Blue Note recordings, and they had a couple of other jazz labels too under their umbrella, but Bruce Lundvall signed me to Capitol, which was the pop label. So I had the pop promotion people and the pop sales people all working on my album. And wow. So it's just kind of like everything kind of came together with the format of radio. In the heyday of the American music business, this was the time when albums like he was my label mate. You Can't Touch This.
MC Hammer, yeah.
MC Hammer. MC Hammer. That was the same year.
That was my first cassette tape when I was a kid. First cassette tape. Please Hammer, Don't Hurt 'Em. I knew every word.
Yeah, and so it was like, during that time period when you could, an artist like him would sell 15 million records, or Bonnie Raitt would sell 5 million records.
It's crazy, those numbers.
just a beautiful storm that I got a wave that I sort of attached onto and sort of have never gotten off. Although this has been a really interesting time period over the last, say, since the fall of that business, the fall of that record business, which has now been replaced by the modern record business, which streaming has added so much new life to a business that was really in the toilet for about 10 years.
Right. Well, yeah, I mean, I think that a lot of people have a mistaken view that streaming was somehow bad for record labels. It was probably the best thing that could happen to record labels.
Absolutely the best thing, and it will only get better. Your music, for example, on the whether it's Spotify or Apple Music, whatever streaming service, but also YouTube, you will make money, for generations. Your heirs will be rich because of this music that you've put on the streaming platforms, because it's never going to go away. It's only going to get more.
Yeah, I mean, masters are so valuable, and that's...
If you think about how many people currently have in the world, on the planet, currently have an internet connection, it's the smallest slice you can imagine. And so as more people become connected, which is going to happen. It might happen slowly, but it will happen eventually, that there will be billions of people connected looking for music like yours, or mine, hopefully, that may have never done any streaming before. So the income streams will continue to get larger and larger. And we've seen it over the last few years, how this is the area of the music business that is really growing. It's one area that's really growing.
It's crazy. I mean, it's exciting in some sense to see the changes. I mean, there are new challenges that come with all this. But before we get into that, I want to talk more about your approach as a bandleader, because it seems like that would be the next logical step. After you put out the album, and then all of a sudden you're getting this crazy amount of fame and attention, and I'm sure the tour was the next thing, right?
Yep, I had a tour that was it was sort of like a promotional tour. We did two of them. It was with a guy named Phil Perry, who was another artist on Capitol, more of an R&B singer, and they thought it would be a great thing. And I knew Phil, so I knew that we would get along and we'd be able to create a great show. And so we did a 2-artist thing. We put a band together. I started the show, and then he came out and he did some songs, and then we finished the show together. It was awesome. We made a video, a concert video. It just took off, and we did it again like about 6 months later. And this was a chance when we would go on these promotional tours. We would play the club, like a big club, and then there would be inviting the radio people, inviting the retail people, inviting guests, and it was just in each city that we did it. It was like planting a seed, and then we could go back a few months later and water the plant and continue to grow.
Right,
and that's really what's been still happening to this day, 30 years later, of creating these little seedlings all around the world, actually.
Right. Well,
that
it still
we continue
works.
to go and plant.
It absolutely does. And that used to be the only way. Now you got the shortcut because of the internet, but the old way is still very valid. You do break each one of these individual markets. Now, I want to talk about just you as a band leader. I mean, was there somebody that you modeled yourself after, or did you just kind of organically just figure it out as you went along?
I had one. There were a few really good ones and one not good one.
Okay, all right. You don't have to say names.
But there was one artist that I work with, and it was invaluable experience. I want to say this in retrospect. I hate it. In the moment that I was doing it, I hated it. I was miserable. But afterward, when I'm able to reflect on what that experience taught me, I was very grateful for it. But this was at a time when it was a pop artist who was also signed to the EMI, another label under the EMI family. And we had the same manager at the time, and he suggested that I go out on the road with this guy. And his career was like tiny. And then on one tour, we started playing to maybe 100 people a night, small clubs. On the same tour, 14 months later, we were playing to 10,000 people a night.
Whoa.
That's the power of a few hit songs. But he was a miserable guy at the time. We became much better later on in our lives, but at the time he was just working out a bunch of demons, and he was just a terror to be around. And you just never knew who you were going to encounter if you saw him on stage or off. And it was really rough. But at the same time, I met all these EMI people. I met all the radio people. It was just, again, planting seeds. So that part of it was great. And I learned in the process of how I don't want to be. It was the last tour that I did before my own tour. And
Right.
so it was an invaluable experience. But there were really great experiences too, like Jeff Lorber, working with him as a boss. Always very, very generous with the stage, always kind, always, he's a genius. He's kind of he's a weird guy, but always kindness in his heart, And then I remember going to a Harry Connick Jr. concert, which was really pivotal right before I started making my own records and promoting my own records and going out on tour. And I was overwhelmed. It was at the Universal Amphitheater in Los Angeles, packed house. I think it was sold out, 6,000 people. Here's Harry Connick Jr., such a young guy. He was maybe 22 or 23 at the time. And he had a full big band. So there was probably 18 people on stage. There was not one person on that stage that he didn't single out and say, look at this guy. Isn't he amazing? Wow. Every trumpet player got to shine. Every trombone player, every sax player, all the rhythm section guys. He was so selfless. And he showed that to me, like, the spotlight, when it goes off of you and onto someone else, doesn't mean that your light goes out.
Right.
In fact, your light gets brighter the more you share your spotlight. You, my friend, know that intuitively. I mean, I look at you look at any PMJ video, it's all your idea. Everything comes from that brain of yours, man. And where are you? I'm happily in the background, letting other people shine, but all the time, everybody understands that the creative output, the creative genius is the man at the keyboard. So you understand that intuitively as well. I needed to see it for me to understand it.
I appreciate that. I mean, that's very nice of you to say. I spent a lot of time as I was learning to manage bands and things like that and just be a band leader myself. I spent a lot of time, seeing how other people did it as well. Yeah, I mean, Harry Connick Jr., he's another great example of somebody that's made a successful career for decades. And it seems like those are the guys that really learned that lesson, like the people that aren't trying to just make it about them or trying to be front and center all the time and not letting other people shine, or that have these insecurities where they can't let somebody upstage them or something like that. Those people, they burn out, That's not really a sustainable way. That's too stressful. Yeah, I appreciate you saying those things. It's something that I've definitely tried my best to do. But also there's a practical matter of it that it's just better for everybody. I mean, I'm not doing anything interesting. Right. I'm just there on the piano. The interesting, it's like the singers are doing crazy stuff and, we got whatever, you popping up out of the frame and just coming, making cameos and stuff like that. I mean, I want people to see that stuff. Like that's so there is a practical application to, that kind of way of thinking.
It also, the main thing that I've learned from it is that it keeps you fresh, because when you collaborate, if you're doing this, if I just had the same band, if I had the same collaborators every time that I went out and did a tour, I'd be doing the same shit every single time. I know me. If not pushed and pulled into new directions, I'd be playing the same, 7 licks that I know on the sets. So this is an opportunity to stretch when you allow other people to shine, and then you see what happens. The wind comes back to you. We see it on our cruises. I've been hosting cruises for 15 years now and producing them, and many of the PMJ people have been on our cruises. So Aubrey Logan and Ariana Savalas and Spencer Day, and we've had a number of them. It's a beautiful thing to feature all these people and just like, especially new artists. I remember with Aubrey, and she's so talented. I mean, she's amazingly talented. But I felt a certain pride that I was introducing her. She came and did one of our big Summer Horns albums and tours. She did two years of touring with us. I was so proud to be able to say to the people that know me, like, check this person out, okay? Of course, she plays the trombone, and that's why she's here, because it's a Summer Horns thing. But then she opens her mouth to sing,
Yeah.
And she does cartwheels on stage.
She's so crazy.
Just like,
she does everything. She's amazing.
and this was like the big win for me, was like, I got a chance to say to my fans, like, here's a new person you need to know about. And that's a big win for me. It's, of course, hopefully a big win for Aubrey, and I know that she enjoyed the experience. But those people, like my fans, will be fans of hers forever. And that, to me, is like one of the great ways of paying it forward.
Absolutely. And it's exciting, on a couple of levels. I mean, it's exciting as a curator of talent, right, to be able to introduce somebody to the world. But then it's also exciting to just be around that energy. And I found that every time we put somebody new on tour, and you be on stage and they're coming out and they're just killing it, and it just elevates the energy for everybody. Everybody on stage is suddenly having so much fun. They're having the time of their life. And I think it is a really vital thing. I think there's very few solo artists that can be, just infinitely creative on their own. I think, we all do depend on the energy from other people to kind of unlock new levels of creativity.
100%. And we're both, you and I can say this confidently, that you and I are better musicians because of it.
Absolutely.
We become better musicians because of our ability to be open to other people's creativity and embrace other people's ideas. Because if you go into any situation locked in, then it's only going to go so far, because that's as far as your wall is. If you have no walls, then it's infinite.
That's a good analogy for it. I mean, it really is. So on that note, let's talk about the Madison Square Garden show you did with Wolfpack. I think that is such a cool. First of all, I'd like to just know how it came about. I'd love to read the story behind that. I got to look into that, because, I mean, what an amazing event.
Well, those guys, Jack Stratton, who's the you of Wolfpack, is the creative genius behind that, and I've been a big fan of theirs for a long time. For obvious reasons, because they're badass. Those guys are badass. They started out as a quartet when they met at the University of Michigan in Ann Arbor, and that was the core group that's still together. Then they added a couple of other people, Corey Wong being one of them, on guitar from Minnesota. And I've just seen how this guy has his own ideas for how things should work.
Yeah.
He's very committed to them. So I think he's a pretty big fan of the concept of scarcity. So Wolfpack, even when they're doing shows, they will only do maybe a total of 20 shows a year. But each show is very special. And like yourselves, they can play in anywhere in the world, because it's an internet phenomenon. They have fans all over the world.
Right.
So they kept building, and I think he had a long-range goal with this. I think that he saw this in his own mind way before it was even remotely a possibility, and he kept building, especially in New York. And I played the year before at their King's Theater show in Brooklyn, which was 2 nights there at probably about a 4,000 seater, and that was another building block to doing Madison Square Garden.
Which is, I would say that's huge, especially for primarily instrumental music.
Oddly, they're just younger people doing similar music that we've done, but it's the currency is badass musicianship. Like what that whole thing is about is musicianship, and if you can play, it's all good. Yeah. So that's the thing. Like yourself, you kind of embrace the idea of, let's have this old sax player, this old gray-haired sax player come and join us, even though he's twice the age of any of our fans. Let's see what happens. And the same thing with Jack. He sort of, because it was Corey who reached out to me originally to collaborate, and I was like, who's Corey Wong, and what is this whole thing? And then I was totally like, my eyes were like, I couldn't believe the musicianship. Here were these amazing musicians playing, as you say, largely instrumental music. And who are the fans? They're all 20-year-old kids.
Amazing.
And digging instrumental funk music. And the building blocks of their music is the same building blocks that I've made with my music for all these years. So it seemed to be like a real natural fit. They embraced me. I embraced them. Did a few gigs with them. And then Jack called and said, I have this idea for Madison Square Garden. It's a big show. I want you to bring your little baby saxophone, your soprano, your curved soprano, and I'm going to put you with Chris Thiele, who is a mandolin player, a world-class mandolin player. I don't know if you know Chris, but that's exactly what he is. Probably the best mandolin player on the planet. And he said, we're going to do small instruments. This is the way Jack thinks. He's like, I want to have tiny instruments play this melody, Smile Meditation from the Wolfpack catalog. And we got together. Chris and I had never played together. We didn't do a sound check or a rehearsal. We just winged it on stage. And here we are, two people joining Wolfpack in front of 18,000 people, and they all went bananas. And to hear that many people clamoring and screaming for like a jazz melody, everybody singing along with the melody, it's surreal. That's the way it feels, is surreal.
It really shows that there's no limit, that there are all those limitations that we think of because we think of jazz or we think of instrumental music having like a ceiling. Like, okay, you can't do this as that. I mean, you can't sell out MSG as an instrumental artist, but it's thrilling to see something like that. It makes you really believe in the art, and it shows you what's possible if you just approach it the right way. And I guess, those guys are very conceptual, right? I mean, I'm a big fan of what they did, how they trolled Spotify. You know how they did that Sleepify album? And it was just all blank stuff, and you play it while you sleep, and they made like $30,000 or something like that in royalties. It's
the thing
cool
with you, sorry for
that,
interrupting.
Sure.
I'm sorry to interrupt, but the thing that you guys have in common, you and the Wolfpack, and I'm surprised that you guys don't know each other yet. I would think that you would know each other. But maybe that's just the way the modern music business is. You can have these different tribes, and you would think that there would be some sort of cross-promotional opportunities, but maybe not. But the thing that Jack and Corey and you guys all have this same thing of to use what you just said, there's no limits. Like nothing is holding you back from trying stuff. So you're free because you're creating really your own model. You're not subscribing to the models. Like for me, when I first started 30 years ago, there was no, you could create your own model. I mean, you could, but you wouldn't have a career. Now there is all these ways that you can have a career and sidestep and be completely independent of what the model music business is now, that still is very, I mean, that's thriving now again. And obviously there's a lot of big major label artists, and that's a way to go too. But you guys have sidestepped that and sidestepped it brilliantly to create your own model and to reap all the rewards too. And to probably more important than the financial rewards is the ability that you have to control your own destiny, and
right.
You get to make the decisions. You don't have some A&R person or some record label head saying, "No, I don't like that song. Track 3's got to go, and you got to do this, and you got to do this, and you got to work with this person. You got to have this person mix." You got none of that shit. You just create your own products and put them out there and respond in real time too. You can respond really quickly. To anything.
Absolutely. You can. I mean, it's an incredible feeling to just know that you can wake up every day and you can create, and you don't have all these other considerations. You don't have the golden handcuffs that a lot of artists get, where they are on a label deal and the label's kind of running the show, kind of telling them what to do. And if they're not directly telling them what to do, they're at least telling them what they can't do.
Mm-hmm.
So it's a powerful thing, and it's really just because of the internet. That's really all that it took. Just the idea of suddenly you can get worldwide distribution by putting up a YouTube video, and that was such a game changer.
Yeah, bravo to you guys. You guys have done an amazing job, and there are people like me and a million other of them like me that are scratching our heads, going, "How the fuck did he do that?"
Well, bravo to you though, because even though you came up through a different time, I mean, you're doing that stuff now. You've got your hands in all these different industries. I mean, you run a cruise. You found ways to bring music to all these different experiences, and you're still staying open-minded. I mean,
yeah, that's what drives me. As I mentioned earlier, it's all about new experiences and being thrown into different pools that and you got to swim. You got to figure out a way to swim in a new pool, and that's the part that keeps me coming back for more. This is also COVID, the Corona pandemic has also given us an opportunity. I mean, your primary, I don't know if it's your primary way of making money, but it's my primary way of making money, which is being on the road
100%,
or doing cruises.
yeah.
We had to cancel our cruise this year, kind of last minute. It was a bloodbath. It was really, really sad because we had almost 4,000 people coming with us on this one, Amsterdam and the British Isles, and it's postponed for a couple years. I don't know what's going to happen with cruising even next year. We have sold out cruises for next year. I don't know if they're going to happen. The cruise industry has been hit so hard. And then the public, theaters and venues, jazz festivals, your guess is as good as mine. This
nobody
idea
has any
of
good
not knowing,
predictions. We just have to
finding comfort in not knowing.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, I mean it's an uncertain time, and that can't really be changed. We don't have any control over that. There's no magic bullet here. I think that when people go through hardships like this, I think it does unlock creativity in a weird way, and we're seeing that. We're seeing that in the sense that people are creating some kind of new types of entertainment out of Zoom conference calls and things like that. That's pretty, you got to give the human spirit something for that. You got to give it to the human spirit for finding a way to still remain upbeat in the face of all this. Right.
Well, we do a Facebook Live stream every Friday. We've done, I think, 8 or 9 of them every week. And people, and I know you've done a bunch of stuff. There's so many artists that are doing things to remain active with their fan bases. But I in talking with other artists, I found that we're all, for the most part, we're doing it for ourselves more than for the fans, just to kind of connect with our instruments and our creativity during this time where it's forced break. And if I didn't have that weekly thing, that weekly connection, I think it would make this time period be much more depressing than it has been. It's already been quite depressing. But those things, 1 hour a week connecting with fans and playing some music have really saved my own head from going to some dark places.
Absolutely.
So music, the power of music, Scott, I've never ever been more of a believer in the healing power of music and the ability for music, whatever it is that's your musical choice, for that to soothe and comfort when words can't and other media just can't. And music does the trick for so many people around the world.
It's an amazing thing. It's really, it must be evolutionary, right? It must be that music's function was to soothe people and to, it's like humor, right? Like a sense of humor. I mean, there's so much in life that is full of sadness and just terrible things happen, but humor is something that kind of always gets people through those kind of situations for many of us. So I think that music is but you can't really explain it otherwise. Like, why does humor feel good? Why does it feel good to laugh? And it's the same thing with music. And it's an interesting thing, and we're definitely in a good business in that sense.
Job security.
I
think music is going to be around for a while.
I think so too. I think this music thing is going somewhere. So I want to get into this. We'll do a second part of this podcast, but let's just tell people where to find you. In case they aren't following you right now and they want to see those Facebook Lives that you do.
You can follow me on social media on Facebook and Twitter at Dave Koz Music. That's at Dave Koz Music. And on Instagram, it's my full given name, because there's a whole bunch of other Dave Kozes on Instagram.
Don't be fooled by the imitators.
Yes. David Stephen with a PH Koz. David Stephen Koz. And you can find Instagram there. And davekoz.com for that's the clearinghouse for all the information.
Yeah, and you got a great YouTube channel too. I know you do a lot of it.
Yeah.
What was it, Driving with Dave?
We did Driving with Dave. We have a bunch of stuff that we capture on our cruises, new artist spotlights and main stage performances, and all the live streams that I've been doing, the Dave Koz at home, Dave Koz and Friends at home. They're all up there. Yeah, we've been doing a lot of content lately, which I'm proud of.
Great. That's really great. All right, well, everybody follow Dave, and thanks so much for coming on here.
Buddy, always a pleasure to talk with you. It's great. Thank you.